Secretary, let me just go right to this. President Biden, he gave his first address to the UN General Assembly today. He sounded triumphant about his ending of the conflict in Afghanistan, saying, quote, we ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan, and as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy. Is this a good reflection, of the state of the Biden foreign policy, that suddenly we're going from we've ended this relentless war, and now it's relentless diplomacy?
Jordan, he forgets that the bad guys get to play their cards too, and that's what he forgot in Afghanistan. It's the piece that I wrote talked about these unanswered questions. We have some questions that are answered. There are still Americans left behind. There's still a massive amount of American equipment behind. We know that this chaotic departure that didn't have to be, we'd left them a plan for the orderly transition, the orderly withdrawal of Americans folks with a firm set of conditions behind it. They ripped it up to create an arbitrary deadline on September 11th. And we know that the net result of this was 13 American lives lost and chaos inside of that country that almost certainly will result in greater risk that we're attacked from that place someday.
Mike, one of the things that as I looked at it and looked at the speech, I think it was not realistic. It wasn't reality. It ignored, as we've said, the Afghan failure. It ignores the border crisis, which is still an ongoing disaster. I said this earlier, we've got France pulling its, with all of the pushback we used to get, and you used to get, and others for President Trump's action on diplomacy and whatnot, which I think actually was great for America. But I remember defending this. And then France pulls back its diplomats from the United States because our diplomats did not evidently, whether the deal was right or not, they didn't handle it diplomatically. I'll say it that way. When you look at all of that, does this speech give more aid to our friends, or does it make them more cautious?
So I was chuckling only because your point's so right. I remember we were the rubes. We didn't know anything about diplomacy. We were the barbarians at the gate breaking these international institutions, and these are the guys who end up having the French pull their ambassador back, and a fellow named Ibrahim Raisi speaking at the UN, who's a mass murderer now running Iran, and they're sitting in Vienna talking to him. I must say that the vision that we had, and I remember the president, I think it was his first speech at the UN, but it was a coherent theory of the case. It said these top-down international institutions are failing the world and American security, and that sovereign nations is the right way to approach this. That's how we built out our foreign policy. Today, what we saw was a pretty incoherent understanding. And when President Biden said that he's one of the foremost foes of terrorism, I must say that the Houthis have been taken off the terror list in Yemen. He refuses to deal with the Taliban, who we know are terrorists. His words are so deeply inconsistent with the actions we've seen in the first 8 months of the administration. I hope they begin to actually live up to that commitment that he made to make sure that terror continues to be fought wherever we find it. We know that President Obama let ISIS run free. It looks like this is the second iteration of that same model.
In your new piece that's up at ACLJ.org, and again, it's titled On Afghanistan, Far Too Many Questions Remain Unanswered. That is brand new from Secretary Pompeo, up at ACLJ.org now. It seems as though you've got President Biden in this position. When he's talking to the American people, when he's addressing the UN like he did today, like putting a bow on the Afghanistan withdrawal. Like, this is done. But it seems like there's like in your piece, so many questions remain unanswered. I think, what was Will, I'm talking about producer Will, that Mayorkas sound about how many people actually had the special immigrant visa. 3%. Only 3% of 60,000 of the 60,000 Afghans that got out during the airlift, Secretary Pompeo, the DHS is saying only 3% of those were the SIVs.
There's going to be a lot of gnashing and gnawing of teeth when we figure out precisely who all has been permitted to come into our country. I'm convinced of that. I don't think there was a rational path forward for this. And so there were decisions made where people who were deserving of getting a chance to come to America, who we'd made promises to over the last 20 years, weren't able to get out. You see some of them still struggling to find their way back, and I'm sure some of them are going to vanish. And then we have people who came in that I'm convinced we will be trying to figure out a way to either find a crime that they committed because they are putting Americans at risk, or we're trying to figure out how to get them back out of the country. This was a chaotic departure from Afghanistan. And, you know, when you set an arbitrary deadline, President Trump wanted to get everybody out, make no mistake about it. But each time we would evaluate, were the conditions right? Have we met the challenges that America faces so we can actually do that? And as we drew down, we put enormous costs on the Taliban in a way that made sure we protected American forces and American property in the country so we could deliver an orderly transition. President Biden just chose to make a chaotic dash for the exit.
Well, that chaotic dash has been unbelievable, actually. And when you get statements like this, and you point this out in your article that's posted at ACLJ.org, that in Germany, the Chancellor Merkel's most likely successor called the execution of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, quote, the greatest debacle that NATO has experienced since its foundation. Now, that is a huge statement, Secretary Pompeo. It's a huge statement because of the ramifications of what it means because the United States orchestrated that withdrawal.
Oh, yes, we drove it. President Biden picked the date. He picked the time. He picked the hour. He picked the cap on American forces. He forced the military into a constraint that required them to abandon Bagram Air Base, the one asset that could have really delivered high-volume exfiltration of our equipment and and American people from the country. Now, these were political decisions, not strategic decisions, not military decisions, but the commander-in-chief himself made that call, and our NATO allies suffered for it. They are not happy about it. And that set of relationships that work. I remember, you have to chuckle. It was the Trump and Pompeo team that was going to destroy NATO. We built NATO. We created. We built NATO. It was $400 billion more resource when we left than when we came, and we had developed those relationships. It was prickly at times for sure, and now you can see our NATO allies and partners very worried that American credibility is non-existent.
I remember actually being in some meetings when we were dismantling NATO. That was the allegation, right? And the administration's dismantling NATO, and your offices are, and it was really all about you and the president saying NATO partners have to actually financially participate in this defense. So meanwhile, nothing happens in a negative way with NATO. It's stronger than it's ever been. And then it's Joe Biden's administration that just bungles this withdrawal, which cost 13 lives of Marines and then 7 kids in that whole disaster where they went after allegedly it was going to be someone that was about to do a terrorist act, and it was an aid worker. And I just think the duplicity in this of the media, though, Mike, is unreal here.
It is. It's just a real disservice to the American people who won't accurately reflect these two very different visions for America's national security and what they really mean on the ground, how they impact American lives each and every day. We know families that have their brothers and sisters and kids that are serving in our armed forces around the world. We built them, we resourced them, we made sure that we protected them everywhere. We didn't have an attack on an American soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine since February of 2019. A remarkable capacity for peace through strength. These folks have come in and put those kids at risk, and the media wants to tell the story the precise opposite way, 180 degrees out, and it's an enormous disservice to our young men and women in uniform and to the American people to understand the risk. When you travel the world and apologize for the United States of America, you put us at risk.
Yeah, I'll be quite honest. It was much more enjoyable traveling the world under the Trump administration, the Obama administration, especially in countries that we do work in where there's always kind of maybe countries are not always allies with the U.S., but there was a healthy respect for what it meant to be an American when you were overseas, and you weren't just part of the European espresso sipping class at the UN. Final question for today, Secretary Pompeo, is this: all of these issues, I feel like today I kind of addressed this in one question, but for the final question, this idea of just trying to move on past Afghanistan, move on past these disasters, it's going to be up to the American people. It's going to be up to people like you speaking out, our broadcast, but also Congress and your former colleagues in the House, the Senate. They've got to continue to press on this as well.
I believe the American people witnessed American weakness in Afghanistan. They could see that the Biden administration wasn't ready for prime time, wasn't ready to execute this really important mission set. And so I don't think, in spite of the fact that President Biden wants to turn the page and pretend that Afghanistan was a happy departure and a successful departure, I don't think the American people, I think they can see with their own eyes that that's not the case. I suspect that this will be in their minds for an awfully long time to come.
Secretary Pompeo, it's always great to have you as part of the team at the American Center for Law and Justice. The new piece by Secretary Pompeo is up at ACLJ.org. It's on Afghanistan. Far too many questions remain unanswered. That's brand new, just up this morning at ACLJ.org.